When it comes to inequities, you talked about when you talked about the Green Revolution, you mentioned inequities, though there is abundance, because the Green Revolution leads to abundance of production of food. But you also mentioned authoritarianism as one contributing factor. Would this argument hold in a democracy or in a liberal system? In other words, what is the role of leadership in all of this, the type of leadership that we have?
Oh, I mean, if you look at the countries that experienced the Green Revolution, many of them were nominally democracies. Many of them had elections. And yet, if you look at India, for example, touted as the world's largest democracy, the Green Revolution happened in large part, and was forced through in large part in Indira Gandhi's dictatorship, in the period of her state of emergency, in which democratic processes were suspended. Now, it's certainly in the global south, there does seem to be a strong tie, particularly in Asia, between authoritarianism and the spread of the Green Revolution. Now, the way I understand it, you're asking whether, is it possible to imagine a democratic process of the Green Revolution flourishing? I mean, for me, the problem with that question lies in the concept of democracy. I mean, frankly, I think that there are very few democracies on Earth. What we have is elections plus authoritarian governments in large part. So if you look at Malawi, for example, again, on paper it has all the trappings of democracy, and yet they've pushed through this new Green Revolution, in fact, as part of a democratic pledge. But when people started becoming aggrieved by the consequences of the Green Revolution, you saw that the steely fist of the state brought out, and so protests in the city, protests around the price of fuel, which are directly related to the Green Revolution policies in Malawi. This year, you saw 18 people killed in protests there. So for me, this idea of either it's a democracy or it's authoritarian is a false dichotomy. I mean, if you look at people who are protesting democratically and peacefully around the world, you'll often find that as soon as they start scratching the surface of a democracy, you find a state that's very intolerant toward dissent. And you see that in the United States with the Occupy protests, you see that in Malawi with the protests against the government's fuel policies, you see it in Mozambique with the food protests that happened earlier on this year, you see it in the Arab Spring. You have these range of nominally, there are elections at some point, although the democratic process is skewed. But underneath that are states that are very, very intolerant toward dissent, and that's in the global north and the global south.